Welcome to Logo Design using Adobe Illustrator, a Maker Studio workshop at the Mount Royal University Library. In the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge that Mount Royal University is situated on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy. The Siksika, the Kainai, Piikani, the Tsuut'ina, Aniyahe, Nakota Nations, the Métis Nation Region 3, and all people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of southern Alberta. The learning objectives of this workshop are to understand what the role of a logo is, to identify different types of logos and when to use them, and to be able to use Adobe Illustrator to create text and shapes. A logo is a representation that symbolizes and communicates a meaning or idea, like a signature, mark, symbol, or combination of visual form. Iconic logos have 5 important design elements. They are describable. That means you can tell someone what it looks like. Think about how you would describe the Instagram logo. Logos are also memorable. People like it. This should be memorable in a good way. I'm sure you can think of logos that you hate and that's why they're memorable. They should be effective without color. The logo might be photocopied or used in different surfaces, so you can't rely solely on its color. Shape is very important. This also means that it has to be simple. A logo should be scalable. For example, it should work when it's just 2 centimeters in size on a tiny screen, or also on a big screen, or a billboard, or a clothing tag. And the logo should be relevant to the industry in question. So does a sleek and sexy logo make sense for a children's product? Or does a bubbly, energetic font make sense for a funeral parlor? There are several types of logo. A wordmark logo mainly uses text and typeface to create its message, although sometimes other elements might also be added. A lettermark logo is similar to a wordmark, but consists only of initials or abbreviations, for example monograms, like the one used by Yves Saint Laurent. A brandmark logo is a graphic symbol, usually simple but powerful, that comes to represent the company in an abstract way, for example, the Nike swoosh or the apple. A combination mark logo, also called an iconic logo type, combines a word mark with a brand mark, communicating both the company's identity and its purpose. Take a look at these logos and see if you can figure out which kind of logo they are. Start with the I Heart New York logo. How about the World Wildlife Fund logo? That's the one in the middle. Now try thinking about the IBM logo. Did you get them right? There are different times to use different kinds of logos. A time to use a wordmark logo design might be when you're establishing the company. In this case, communication funds are limited and should be focused on name recognition. Your name is reasonably distinctive, but is not yet a household word. Or you might want to associate products with the parent more clearly and directly than a symbol would permit. Sometimes the word is too long or difficult to pronounce, or it's strange or complicated. This is the time when you might want to use a lettermark logo design. In this situation, your initials might translate graphically better than your actual name. You might need to link subsidiaries to the parent company and can't easily use the name. Or you can afford to teach the public what the lettermark actually means. The choice to use a brand mark logo design might be driven by the product or service you are offering, or that you're an established company. Maybe you need an emblem on a product, or your name is too long, too generic, or doesn't translate well globally, or just has no personality. You might need to link subsidiaries to the parent company and can't easily use the name. and you can afford to teach the public what that symbol means. Think about the Nike swoosh logo. This was designed in 1971 by Carolyn Davidson, while she was a graphic design student at Portland State University. She was paid $2 an hour for the design, which is the equivalent of about $14 per hour today. Today, it has become one of the most recognizable brand logos in the world, and the most valuable, having a worth of about $26 billion alone, according to Wikipedia. The Nike swoosh wasn't always used alone. Initially, it incorporated the Nike name alongside the swoosh, and in 1988, it appeared alongside the trademark, Just Do It. You can cover all bases with a combination mark logo design. Maybe you're a startup enterprise or a small business with limited funds. Maybe your name is reasonably distinctive but not yet a household word. Maybe you need an emblem on a product but just want more than just a symbol. This is where a combination mark can be really useful. Now that you've learned some things about logos, it's your turn to try designing one yourself. Please open Illustrator on your computer. When you open Illustrator, it will look like this. You'll have your recent documents down here. You'll have some standard documents to be able to create new files here, or you can press Create New. We're going to press Create New. That should bring up this new document window. This allows you to create a variety of documents that are ready-made for you for mobile, for web, for print, for film and video, and art and illustration. Each of these will have different resolutions. We're going to go with print. We can use the standard letter size over here, or we can customize the size of the document on the right-hand side. We're going to name our document here, so we're just going to type over where it says Untitled with logo, or whatever you would like to name your document. We'll change our units by pulling this pull-down menu on the right-hand side where there's an arrow from points to inches. This is going to give us a default of an 8.5 by 11 document. We can change that by typing over this number if we want. I'm just going to put it back. We're going to use the default of an 8.5 by 11 inch document. It's going to give us one artboard. We only need one artboard for today. I'll explain what the artboard is in a minute. And we don't need a bleed. A bleed is where you can create the document with a little bit of extra paper on the outside, and you can design into that space, and that allows you to overprint. This is for if you're creating posters or magazines, especially if they're going to be printed on a commercial print press. We're not going to do that with this document, so we don't need to create a bleed right now. We're going to come down to the bottom once we've done those settings and press Create. This brings up the artboard and our main page where we're going to do the design in Illustrator. The first thing you want to do in Illustrator is take a look at the workspace that you have. Your workspace might not look like mine, so in order to make sure that it looks like mine, to follow along with the workshop, I'm going to ask you to come across to this little box on the right-hand side on the top. Make sure that Essential Classics is clicked. Then your workspace should look exactly like mine. Along the top here is the menu bar. On the left here, these are all the tools and options that you have for designing things. This is like your toolbox or your artist palette. Along here, this is your control panel with some options. And for each tool, the properties over here will change when you select a tool. Let's take a look at the toolbar on the right-hand side. When you hover over the tools, what you'll see is that they come up with the name of them. So if you click on it, you'll see that this is the Direct Selection tool. This is the Selection tool. There's a number of different tools. When you hover over them, you'll see what they're called with this little box that pops up. You can zoom in on information by using this zoom tool so that you can see more details in your artboard. Your artboard is kind of like the piece of paper on which you're doing your design. You can use the hand tool to move things around in order to see things. A shortcut, if you get too zoomed in and you want to see things and fit it all in the screen, is Control-Alt-0. That fits everything in the screen. You can also go to View and take a look at all of these options with guides, zoom in, zoom out, fit all in the window. That's the shortcut. You can see the shortcuts for these moves just on the right hand side. So Control-Alt-0. That's the shortcut. You'll learn the shortcuts as you get more familiar with Illustrator. The first tool we are going to use is the Type tool. When you click on the Type tool, that's the T on the left-hand side. If you click and hold, you'll see there's this little triangle in the bottom right-hand corner of the box. If you click, so that's left click and hold, you'll see all these other options for the Type tool come up. We're just going to use the default Type tool, which is the one at the top. Then we're going to click on the artboard. You'll see this word lorem ipsum come up. We are going to use our keyboard to type over with some initials to put the text in there. If you've used the Type tool and you've clicked and then you've clicked outside of the Type tool, you'll see that it's no longer selected. The text is selected when it has a black box around it. In order to reselect the text, you can bring your cursor, click at the beginning of the word, and then hold and drag across, and that highlights the word. Now you can type over it. Or you can just double click on the word, double left click, highlights the whole word. If you want to get rid of it, when it's highlighted, you can just press delete. With your text selected, the two letters that you have added, you can change the typeface up here on your control panel. You will see previews on the right hand side of all the different fonts that are available and what they look like. Choose a font that you think is interesting and change it to a size that's going to fill the page. You can use this pull down, but it only goes to 72 points. You might want it bigger than that, in which case you can go into this box and change the number to something that's going to fit on the page. What you'll see here is that now it's not on my artboard. So I'm going to come over to the left-hand side, click my selection tool. That way I can move my design. My design is a little bit too big. I want to make it smaller. I can change the points up here and maybe make it 450 points, or I can use these corners and change the shape of it by dragging the blue box from the corner. What you'll see is the proportions of the object change. And maybe I don't want that. I want to keep the letter forms the way that they were designed. If I want to constrain the proportions as I move from the corner of the blue selection box, by holding Shift, I constrain the proportions of those letter forms. I'm going to hold Shift and just change it to the size that fits better on my artboard. What you'll see is that the points have now changed. I'm going to center it on my artboard, and then we're going to make some changes to it. Feel free to pause the video if you want to play around with changing the typeface and choosing a font up here on the control panel and changing the size of it to something that you want to do. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to change these letter forms, the word that we've created in a sense, we're going to change it into shapes. Now shapes are objects in Illustrator. So we're going to go up to our menu panel. We're going to go Object, Expand. We are going to create an object and we're going to maintain the fill. So we're going to just use the defaults that are in our properties menu that pops up here and press OK. What you'll see is that now the object is selected and it has these points around it. If you have letters that are created and they are not selected, you will not be able to expand them. You will go to Object, Expand, and it won't be highlighted, so you won't be able to do it. If that's happening, just use your selection tool, select the letters that you've created, and then go to Object, Expand, and you'll be able to expand them. I'm going to delete those two. And instead, I'm going to select my original pair. As I select this using the selection tool, I can move it around, but what I see is that even though they are now objects, they're still linked together. In Illustrator, what that is called is grouped. I want to ungroup them, so I will go back to Object and ungroup those two letters. Now, when I deselect it by selecting outside of those two letters, and then I reselect one of my letters, I can move them independently from each other. That allows me to play around with the placement of those objects. I can still scale them the way that I could before when they're selected with the selection tool and have the blue box around them by pulling on the two anchor points that are in the corner. Again, if I want to constrain the proportions, I can hold Shift and it will scale proportionally. If I choose that I don't want to, I can move it in and out. What I'll see is that this pink line shows up, and that means that I am moving it along the baseline of the two letters. That's a guide. It's really handy. We've seen how you can select with the selection tool and change the shape of an object by pulling on these anchor points. I now want to introduce you to the direct selection tool, which allows you to manipulate the shape even more closely. If you click on the selection tool, that's the direct selection tool, the white version of the selection tool, you can click on the anchors. So let's just try this one. When it is selected, we can see that it goes blue. The other ones have a white filling. This one has a blue filling. When it is selected by clicking on it once, we can now manipulate that anchor point and change the shape of the letter form that we have. Try manipulating some of your anchor points and see what shapes you can create. You can select more than one anchor point at a time. I can select this one. If I hold Shift before I select the next one, it will select both of them at the same time. I can tell because they not both now have a blue filling. I can select as many as I want and then release the Shift button, and as I move one, it will move all of those anchor points that have been selected. I don't really love the design that I've created here, so I'm going to undo those moves by using Control-Z. I do want to make some changes to this H though. So I'm going to select my object. I'm going to select this anchor point, hold Shift so I can select this other anchor point at the same time and move those in. You'll see that the pink line comes up, and that means that I'm moving it along the baseline. As opposed to if I move it this way, you can see that the pink line disappears. I really like that pink line because it acts as a guide for me to make sure that I'm moving things straight. I'm going to manipulate the K as well by doing the same thing. Have a play around with changing the shapes of your letter forms. Feel free to pause the video if you need a little bit more time for playing. Another way to select more than one point at the same time is to drag a box from the left to the right around those points. You can then move things in whichever way you want. If you don't like it, you can always undo it with a Control Z. I'm going to select these, move them out. Using that technique, I'm going to select these 2 points. Remember, I can see them because they're filled with blue as opposed to white. Once you get your 2 letter forms to a shape that you like, we're going to move on to creating our own shapes. There are a number of different ways to create your own shapes in Illustrator. I'm just going to show you one of the tools, and then you can experiment with others on your own. We're going to come below the Direct Selection tool, down to the Curvature Selection tool. It looks like a fountain pen with a line coming from it. Click on it once, and that will select that tool. You're going to left click once on your artboard, and then left click and drag. Left click again, and what's going to happen is every time you left click, you will drop an anchor point and create a path in between those points to create a shape. Try creating a shape. I'll do that again. With your curvature tool, click, 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 and then you want to click on your first point in order to close that shape. It doesn't matter what shape you create to begin with, just get it close to something that you want and make sure that you have enough anchor points so that then we can manipulate that shape in a moment. I'll show you how to do that. Once you have a closed shape, you're going to come back to your Direct Selection tool. Just like we did with our letter forms, when you click on an anchor point, what's going to happen when you have a curved shape is you get what's called a handle. When you click and drag on the handle, what happens is you change the shape of the curve that is creating the object. If I click on this handle, I can change the shape of this blob. If I click on the anchor, I can move that out and also change the shape of my blob. Play around with clicking on the handles and on your anchors to create a shape that's going to go underneath the 2 letter forms, however you've designed them. Remember, it's click and drag on the handles. Remember that each anchor has 2 handles so that you can get it to the shape that you want. Using the same curvature tool, create another shape underneath, perhaps overlapping the shape that you've already created. Use your selection tool to move it so that it overlaps. Use your direct selection tool to change the anchors and the handles to make an interesting shape. One thing we haven't talked about yet is color. You can change the colors of your objects by clicking down here on the fill color, and underneath, if you click on it, what you'll see is the stroke color. The stroke is the outline. Right now, you can see that I don't have anything allocated for a stroke, and I have no color on my stroke. If I click on this color, it will come up, double click on the color here for the stroke. It will come up with the color picker window. I can now choose any of these colors, press OK. It hasn't created the stroke yet because I haven't given my stroke very much of a thick line, so you can't see it because it's selected. Right now it comes up as 1 point. If I make that bigger by using the arrows, you can see the stroke grow. Now we can see that my K is behind my H. My H does not have a stroke on it. I can tell that because the white box here and also down here has a red line through it. And also my stroke doesn't have any points allocated to it. So it doesn't have a thickness. I can give it a thickness up here, and I can give it the same color as my K. I can do the same thing with my blobs, and you can change the fill color in the same way. Click once on the fill color down here at the bottom of your toolbox and pull up a different color. You can allocate a stroke if you like. In here, if I pull down here, I can choose the color that I've created using the color picker down here, and I can add it to a palette. New swatch. This is the color. I can press OK. Now I see my new swatch color show up here. So if I want to fill my K with that same color, I can now come up here and use that pink. This is how we change the colors in Illustrator. If, like me, you've chosen some hideous colors and want to change them back, you can do that quite easily. With your object selected, you can select more than one object at a time if you want. You can press Shift, and then because you have numerous objects with different fill colors selected, your fill color down here is going to have a question mark. We can change that up here by turning it all black, or we can go to the color picker and change the color in here. Now they're all the same color. I can do the same with the stroke. I can turn the stroke off in here. Now my objects are all one color with no stroke. Choose some colors that you like by playing around with the color picker or with the swatches that are already made for you up here. Feel free to turn the stroke on or off, whatever is your taste. At this point, you should have two letters overlapping and two blobby objects overlapping that you've created. Once you're happy with the shapes, what you'll still see is that they can be moved independently. You might want to group them so that they don't move independently. You can select both objects that you'd like to group, go to Object on your menu bar, and Group. Now they will move together, but they're not one object. There are still two objects just grouped. I want to turn my K and H into a cohesive logo, in which case then they are both connected and one shape. In order to join them as one shape, I'm going to use the Shape Builder. I will select both of those objects. They're grouped, so every time I select one, it selects both of them now. And over on the left-hand side in my tool menu is a cloud with an arrow on it, a selection tool on top of a cloud. That's called the Shape Builder tool. Select that tool. What you'll see is that now both of your objects are highlighted and the shape is created where they overlap. Left click between those two shapes and drag over to the other side, and it will join those two shapes. I'll do that again to show you. I have my two objects selected because they're grouped. If I ungroup them, Object, Ungroup, I have to select them both using the Shift key. I can still come over here to my Shape Builder and drag a line between the two parts that I would like to join. I don't want them to be this color. I'd like them to be black, so I'm going to come up here and turn them black in the fill with my selection tool, not the Shape Builder. I'm going to blend these two objects too, just to show you again. Select both objects, selecting one, holding Shift, and selecting the other one. Now both are selected. And then using the Shape Builder tool, click on the Shape Builder once and drag a line between where you want it to join. If you see there, I can join this part, but not the other two parts. I can join this part, but not these parts. I want the whole thing to join, so I'm going to drag my lines between all of those parts. See if you can join your objects and make them into one shape by using the Shape Builder. In order to move the shapes, you would come back to your Selection tool. You can now move your blobby object underneath your letter forms. You might find that it's on top and you want it behind. You would go to Object, with it selected, Object, Arrange, Send to the back. If you have more objects than that, you can send them to the back or send them backwards in order to order the objects that you have. You can position your blobby object in a way that you want it. Of course, you can still scale it. You can use your direct selection tool to change the shape, even at this point in the design. Play around with your two objects and get them the way that you want them, using all of the tools that we've learned so far. If you now have a design that you're happy with, you can use your Selection tool, select both of those objects, and you can group them so they don't accidentally get moved. Now when you move them, they will move together as one. You can still ungroup and you can continue to edit your design. At this point though, I think we're ready to go with our design. Well done. I hope you're enjoying your logo. The final thing to do is to save your design. Go to File, Save. You'll save your design as an Illustrator file. If you want to create a JPEG to be used in presentations, for example, you need to export your design. So you go to File, Export, Export as a JPEG. If you pull down here, you have lots of options for the different kinds of things that you can export this as. Export it as a JPEG, press. I've already saved mine as a JPEG, so I'm just going to press yes, I want to replace it. These are the defaults. You can change the quality of the export if you want. I'm going to save it as maximum quality with high resolution and press OK. Now I have both an Illustrator file that I can continue to edit, and I have a JPEG that is a flat, smaller file that I can put into a presentation. Congratulations! You've created your combination mark logo design. I hope you get to enjoy it and use it in a variety of applications. Well done! There are a number of resources for learning Adobe Illustrator on the Maker Studio website, which you'll find on the Mount Royal University Library website. You can also find ebooks and physical books like the two that we've listed here. If you have any further questions, you can reach out to any of the team in the Maker Studio. Our email addresses are listed here. You can reach all of us at the one email that is makerstudio@mtroyal.ca. Thank you.